The Christmas dinner table looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting, if Norman Rockwell had painted scenes of family dysfunction. Crystal glasses caught the light from Mom's chandelier, reflecting on faces that were already flushed from wine and judgment. I sat between Cousin Jake and my sister Lisa, wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn to every family gathering for the past 3 years. It was a nice blazer, well-tailored, professional, but nobody at this table would recognize quality unless it came with a designer label prominently displayed. "So, Kevin," Uncle Richard said, cutting in his prime rib with surgical precision, "still playing with computers?" The table quieted, sensing blood in the water. Uncle Richard was the family's self-appointed success barometer, a real estate developer who never let anyone forget he owned the biggest residential development company in 3 counties. "I'm still in tech, yes." "Tech," he repeated like the word tasted bad. "You know, when you dropped out of law school, your father and I thought you'd at least find something stable. Insurance, maybe. Banking." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but said nothing. He'd stopped defending my career choices years ago, worn down by Uncle Richard's relentless campaign to prove I was the family disappointment. "Kevin's doing fine," Mom interjected weakly, but her heart wasn't in it. She'd been hoping I'd announce an engagement tonight, or at least a promotion to something she could brag about at her book club. "Fine." Uncle Richard laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "The boy's 31 years old, lives in a studio apartment, and works for some company nobody's heard of. That's not fine, that's failure." My studio apartment was actually a converted loft in the arts district that I'd bought outright for $340,000 3 years ago, but explaining that would require them to listen, and Uncle Richard wasn't interested in listening. "You'll never amount to anything in business," Uncle Richard declared, raising his wine glass like he was delivering a toast. "Some people are born for success, and some people are born to work for the successful people. Nothing wrong with knowing your place." The whole family laughed and agreed. Cousin Jake, who'd just started his 3rd entry-level marketing job in 2 years. Aunt Patricia, who'd never worked outside the home, but considered herself an expert on career advancement. My sister Lisa, whose greatest professional achievement was marrying a dentist. They all nodded along with Uncle Richard's assessment of my worthlessness, comfortable in their shared certainty that I was the cautionary tale of the family. My phone buzzed against my leg. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number with a New York area code. Normally I'd ignore it, but something made me hesitate. "Excuse me," I said, starting to stand. "Oh," let it ring. Uncle Richard waved dismissively. "Unless it's someone offering you a real job, it can wait." The phone kept buzzing. Then an idea struck me, the kind of impulsive decision that my family would have called reckless if they'd known I was capable of making them. I answered the call and put it on speaker. "Kevin Morrison speaking." "Mr. Morrison, this is Sarah Chun from Forbes magazine. I hope I'm not calling it a bad time, but I wanted to personally congratulate you on making this year's billionaire list." The dining room fell silent, except for the sound of Aunt Patricia's fork hitting her plate. "Forbes billionaire list," I repeated carefully, watching Uncle Richard's face turn an interesting shade of purple. "Yes, sir. Your company's IPO last month was absolutely remarkable. Quantum Dynamics going from startup to $12.8 billion valuation in 6 years. It's one of the most impressive growth stories we've covered. We'd love to schedule an interview about your journey." I looked around the table at faces frozen in various stages of confusion and shock. Mom's mouth was hanging open. Dad was gripping his wine glass, so hard I thought it might shatter. "That's very kind of you," I said into the phone. "Could I call you back tomorrow? I'm having dinner with family." "Of course." "And Mr. Morrison?" "The article about quantum computing revolutionizing data processing. Brilliant work. You're reshaping entire industries." "Thank you. I'll speak with you soon." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then moved past uncomfortable into something approaching surreal. Uncle Richard was the first to find his voice. That was really Forbes magazine. Sarah Chun, senior reporter. She covers tech and finance. And they said, "Billionaire list?" I nodded. "The annual Forbes billionaire list comes out next week. Quantum Dynamics IPO pushed my net worth to $1.3 billion, apparently. Cousin Jake made a sound somewhere between a cough and a wheeze. Quantum Dynamics, that's your company? I founded it 6 years ago. We develop quantum computing systems for data processing and artificial intelligence applications. Mom found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Kevin, honey, are you saying you're a billionaire? As of last month's IPO, yes. The table erupted in chaos. Everyone talking at once, questions flying, wine glasses forgotten as the family tried to process information that contradicted everything they believed about me for years. But your apartment, Lisa sputtered. It's tiny. It's a loft. I like lofts. They're efficient. And your car, Jake added. You drive that old Toyota. It's reliable. Gets good gas mileage. Uncle Richard was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. How long? How long have you been successful? Define successful. The company became profitable in year 2. We hit our first $100 million in revenue in year 4. The IPO was just the public recognition of what we'd already built. But you never said anything, Mom protested. All these family dinners, all these years, and you never mentioned. Mentioned what? That I was building a quantum computing company? I try, Mom. Remember 3 Christmases ago when I started explaining quantum algorithms and you changed the subject to ask when I was getting married? She had the grace to look embarrassed. Or last Easter when I mentioned landing our first Fortune 500 client and Uncle Richard said I was getting ahead of myself because I didn't understand real business? Uncle Richard's face had progressed from purple to an alarming shade of gray. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to assume I was failing than to actually listen to what I was doing. Dad cleared his throat. Son, I think we owe you an apology. For what? For not believing in me? For treating me like the family disappointment? For laughing when Uncle Richard said I'd never amount to anything? The silence returned, heavier this time, weighted with years of dismissal and condescension. Kevin, Aunt Patricia said carefully, we had no idea you were so accomplished. I'm the same person I was an hour ago. The same person I've been for 6 years while building this company. The only thing that changed was a phone call telling you my net worth. But why didn't you tell us? Lisa asked. Why let us think? Think what? That I was a failure because I didn't drive a BMW or live in the suburbs? That success has to look a certain way to count. I stood up, smoothing down my 3-year-old blazer that had cost me $150 at Nordstrom Rack and had served me well through countless investor meetings and board presentations. The truth is, I did tell you. I told you I was working on revolutionary technology. I told you we were changing how computers process information. I told you we had clients who were household names. But you heard computers and assumed video games or IT support or something small and unimportant. Uncle Richard finally found his voice again. Kevin, I was wrong. About everything. I'm sorry. Are you sorry because you misjudged me? Or because you found out I'm worth more money than you are? The question hung in the air like smoke. Uncle Richard opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. That's what I thought. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I glanced at the screen, then looked around the table of my family, my shocked, embarrassed, suddenly very interested family. Excuse me, I said, answering the call on speaker again. Kevin Morrison. Mr. Morrison, this is David Park from TechCrunch. We're running a story about Quantum Dynamics IPO success and your rise as one of the youngest billionaires in tech. Could we get a quote about your background and what drives your innovation? I looked at Uncle Richard, who was staring at his plate like he wanted to disappear into it. Actually, David, I'm at a family dinner right now. Could I call you back tomorrow? Of course. And congratulations again. What you've built is truly remarkable. I hung up and sat back down. Where were we? Kevin, Mom said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I'm so proud of you. I always have been. I didn't understand. You understand now because Forbes called. If that phone hadn't rung, you'd still be sitting here agreeing that I'll never amount to anything. That's not fair, Lisa protested. Isn't it? How many times have you introduced me to your friends as my brother who works with computers in that apologetic tone? How many family events have included jokes about when I'm going to get a real job? The answers were written on their faces. Too many times to count. I'm not angry, I continued. Well, maybe I'm a little angry, but mostly I'm disappointed. For 6 years, I've been building something incredible, creating technology that's changing the world, employing 340 people who are solving problems that seemed impossible 5 years ago. I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app, scrolling to pictures from our IPO celebration. This is our headquarters in Austin. 47,000 square feet of the most advanced quantum computing research facility in North America. These are my employees, brilliant people with PhDs from MIT and Stanford who chose to work for me because they believe in our mission. I showed them pictures of the IPO bell ceremony, of our quantum processors, of the awards we'd won for innovation. This is what I've been doing while you all assumed I was wasting my life. This is what playing with computers actually looks like when you're building the future. Uncle Richard was studying the photos with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle. Kevin, Christ, I've been such an ass. Yes, you have. Can you forgive me? I consider the question seriously. I can forgive you, Uncle Richard. But I need you to understand something. Success isn't always visible from the outside. Some of the most important work being done in the world is being done by people who look ordinary, who drive ordinary cars, who live in ordinary places. I know that now. Do you? Or do you know that I happen to be worth $1.3 billion, which meets your definition of success? He was quiet for a long moment. Both, I think. I'm learning both. The rest of dinner passed in a surreal haze of questions and apologies and attempts to understand how they'd all gotten everything so completely wrong. My phone rang twice more. Investors, reporters, people who understood exactly what quantum dynamics represented for the future of computing. As we cleared the table, Dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. Son, I owe you the biggest apology of all. I should have supported you from the beginning. I should have asked more questions, listened better, believed in you. I know, Dad. Can we start over? Can you tell me about your work? Really tell me, so I can understand. I looked at my father, seeing genuine regret and curiosity in his eyes for the first time in years. I'd like that. But Dad, next time I tell you I'm working on something important, maybe don't wait for Forbes to call before you believe me. He smiled sadly. Deal. That night, I drove home in my reliable Toyota to my efficient loft apartment, where I had a quantum processor prototype sitting on my kitchen counter next to a bowl of fruit and a stack of research papers. My phone was full of voicemails from family members who suddenly wanted to reconnect, to understand, to be part of my life in ways they'd never bothered with before. Tomorrow, I'd return most of those calls. I'd explain quantum computing to my mother, show my sister the patents we'd filed, maybe even invite Uncle Richard to tour our facility so he could see what real innovation looked like. But tonight, I just sat in my chair by the window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about how strange it was that my family needed a magazine to tell them their son was worth loving. The Forbes article would come out next week. There would be more interviews, more recognition, more people suddenly interested in Kevin Morrison's story. But I was still the same person I'd been at dinner, wearing the same blazer, living the same life, building the same impossible things out of quantum particles and determination. The only difference was now everyone knew it.